Thanks so much for coming on today.
No, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So, in terms of starting off, where did the idea to combine barbering and mental health sort of come in for you?
So I think for me personally, I've always been someone who suffered with confidence, and I found with barbering, it can put a lot of strain on you as a person. Um, you've got one chance really to give someone a good haircut for them to want to come back. Um, Especially with walk-in services, you don't know who's going to come in, so there's that anticipation of what haircut you're going to have, what sort of client they're going to be. And I found I struggled with that quite a bit. A lot of it was probably self-sabotaging and just putting too much pressure on myself. Um, and I sort of thought whether this is something that's industry wide or whether it's just me, my personal problems. So I'd often use sort of Facebook groups where I knew other barbers were and sort of just put the feeling out that, does anyone else suffer with these sort of pressures? And actually it's quite a wide thing. A lot of
Okay.
people find that, the stress of making the perfect haircut, although there isn't one, did put a toll on people's mental health.
Mm.
So it's quite reassuring to know that it wasn't just me personally. So that's how it all started, with actually thinking maybe there's something in this industry where mental health for barbers needs to be looked at,
Yeah.
because a lot of people suffer in silence and, are very self-critical. And with that, it can then affect your job moving forward.
Mm.
Every haircut becomes almost a chore, not feeling like you're good enough. Like any profession, really, you have your good and bad days, but the bad days would tend to override the good days.
Mm.
And I think with barbering, feeling confident is a big part of it, because ultimately you're giving someone a service which makes them feel good. If you're lacking in confidence, that's going to sort of come across in the haircut.
Yeah.
And people I've spoken to have said, it's just a haircut, a haircut's a haircut. But depending on how far you want to go in your career and how good you want to be, it's a profession where you can be quite harsh on yourself. So that's where it sort of started. Actually, maybe mental health in barbering with barbers to start with is something that needs to be explored, because a lot of barbers are self-employed. So it's not like it's companies that run mental health groups. So a lot of barbers are sort of self-employed. They have their own system, their own plans and stuff. So actually, there's probably not, unless they've got a manager they can talk to, there's no one really to reach out for help.
Mm.
So that's where it started for me.
Yeah. And I suppose that feeling of like those doubts and that anxiety will resonate with people, like you said, outside of barbering as well.
Yeah.
And then that feeling of reaching out to other people and realizing that there are other people feeling that way.
Yeah.
I think that's a massive thing as well for people when we're told to talk or we're told to talk about what we're going through.
Yeah.
Maybe people won't relate to me, but that sort of then reinforces actually this is something that's really, really common.
Yeah, because I mean, if you're a barber in a barber shop with 4 other barbers, you might not want to feel like you can tell the others, because they might start to doubt your ability, might start to question whether you're fit for the job. So then there's that pressure that actually, well, I can't talk to my colleagues because I don't want them to think that I'm struggling, because I'm self-employed or I'm renting a chair. Are they going to think that actually I'm sort of not qualified or not suited for the job? So then, other than you can talk to family and friends, but because they're not in the industry as well, there's that understanding is not quite there.
Mm.
So yeah, I thought, well, that this gives me an opportunity actually to maybe create something that barbers can talk to one another and bounce off ideas and coping mechanisms and things they can try. So that's ultimately where that started.
Yeah. And how long have you been sort of within the barbering industry, and how have you seen that change? Has it changed at all in the time you've been in?
Yeah, so I'd say on and off for about 4 years. I did an apprenticeship when I left school. And back then, so I'm 34 now, so when I did it when I was 17, there wasn't as many barber shops as there is now.
Right.
So I suppose the pressure of, I mean, there's always a pressure of keeping your clients, but there was very far and few barbers in a high street. So the competition wasn't as as high as it is now. Um, Whereas nowadays there's at least 4 or 5 barbers at high street. Um, so you've got the pressure of, I need to maintain clientele, give good haircuts so they come back to us and not another barber's. Um, so I definitely think since I started to now, there is a pressure of keeping clients, which is in barbering anyway, but more
Mm.
so because everything's getting expensive, haircuts are getting more expensive, and there are cheaper shops. You might not get as good of a service, but ultimately people do look for cheaper options,
Mm.
and there are cheaper options out there. So I think that alone again brings pressure that you need to keep your clients in the shop and happy. Um, so yeah, it has changed, I'd say, in regards to competition wise,
Mm.
which brings its own pressures, as
Yeah,
is any
absolutely. I
industry.
bet. Yeah. And in terms of yourself having been in the barbering industry, have you always had these sort of conversations like with clients? Is that something you started to do more recently, sort of speaking about maybe what your clients are going through as well?
Yeah, I think as I've got older, I mean, I would always start a conversation with, so how you keeping, or how's your day been? Um, and some clients don't want to talk at all. They might just give a one-word answer. So respect that. So you just do the haircut. Some people you'll ask, how you keeping, and they'll tell you about their work schedule, football, and you can have a general conversation for half an hour. Um, but I have found just asking how are you at the start of a haircut allows people to feel they can open.
Mm.
And this is all ages, so like teenagers to people in their 70s and 80s, um, giving them sort of almost like an open window to say, yeah, no, I'm okay, or actually, no, I'm not too good today. I have found that simple. How are you keeping? Can start a whole conversation for the whole haircut.
Yeah, just asking that question, and I suppose paying attention to the response. I think in life,
Yeah,
we go through life, and everyone we meet, we say, "Hi, how you doing? Yeah, I'm good. How are you?" And
yeah,
that's it. It's like it's just a back and forth. It's just a polite thing.
yeah,
Whereas if you actually ask it genuinely, there's a difference there, and you can pick up on people's responses, I think.
yeah. And I think as I've got older, so I've got my life experiences. So I've got kids. I've been divorced. I've had my own mental health, suicide issues. So once you get a feel of someone who's got kids, then you talk about kids. If someone's been divorced, um, and once I say oh yeah, I've been through the same process, they then sort of ask me questions about how I got on, and then before you know it, I know their background, their life story, and these are people that 20 minutes, half an hour ago I've never met,
Mm.
and within just open conversation, I probably there's chances that I know stuff that their friends don't know, and it's such a powerful platform to have someone sitting in your chair and just having a conversation,
Mm.
because by the end of it you don't know what you're going to discover.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I've spoken a few times on here when I've spoken to sort of Dr. Susie Bennett and stuff about how men communicate, and that face to face tends not to work as well in general for men.
No,
So having an option where one of one of the people's just doing a job on the hair, not even looking at the reactions,
yeah,
yeah, it maybe allows that person in the chair to just open up a bit more without that feeling of someone watching their every move, their
yeah.
every reaction, as they sort of explain themselves. Um, in the barbershop, then, how do you create a sort of safe space for those conversations to happen? I know we spoke a bit before about do some mobile barbering,
Hmm.
but when you're in a shop and maybe there's people sort of waiting who maybe are able to overhear, how
Yeah.
do you allow people to then have that conversation if they're aware
So
of that?
yeah, so I would never push for a conversation. So I would always let it be led by the client. And there has been shops I've worked in where space is tight. Um, but it's funny. It's almost like you're in a bit of a bubble.
Mm.
Um, so I'll still ask the same questions. How you keeping? How's your week been? And if they lead with actually I've not been too good, um, I'll sort of gauge how they feel about it, how much they're willing to speak, and it almost the reason I say a bubble is it's almost because the background noise is sort of it's not really heard.
Mm.
Um, as long as the client is comfortable talking about the topic of conversation that we're having, um, yeah, obviously I know my limits on what I can ask and what I can say. So it's yeah, it's funny. It is like you're sort of secluded from the rest of the shop.
Mm.
Um, and if they're happy to keep the conversation going, then I'll keep it going as well.
Yeah, I suppose it's ultimately on them, isn't it? How far they want to go and
Yeah,
what they want to share. So it's good to have that sort of led by them approach, I suppose.
yeah, and it's funny. I don't imagine unless someone's really close with their barber. I don't imagine someone comes into a shop and thinks, do you know what, I'm going to talk about um, my kid's illness today or my divorce that I'm going through.
Mm.
That's why I say it's such a powerful thing having someone in the chair because it is like a form of therapy if they want it to be. Um, you've got, depending on appointments and haircuts, you've got half an hour to an hour with someone.
Yeah.
Um, and like I say, if you find something in common or a life experience that you've both gone through, the conversation just completely flows.
Mm.
Um, and like I say, I've had people in my chair that I've not cut before. Yeah, I know that they're struggling with a divorce. They're having to move out. It's it's hard on their kids. And I've sort of come away from the conversation, and they've said, thanks for your time today, speaking. And I've sort of come away thinking, I'm really surprised you opened up that much
Mm.
because I don't know who you are,
Yeah.
but I'm grateful and I appreciate that you felt comfortable enough to talk to me about it. Um, and it's stuff like that where I just think, as barbers in a barber shop or even mobile, but more so in a shop, it's not a case of all barbers should be mental health consultants or know about mental health, but we have such a strong position to be able to talk to people.
Mm.
And if someone is crying for help but they don't really know where to turn, then just having us to talk to could be a stepping stone for them to discover what it is they need help with.
Yeah. And I suppose that's testament to you in your ability to have the conversations and make people feel so comfortable
Yeah.
that they're willing to share all that stuff to you. Because if you were closed off in any way, that wouldn't be happening.
No,
So,
not at all.
so it's definitely like a two-way thing as
Yeah.
well. In terms of your personal sort of drive for it, then, so you mentioned a bit about some of your struggles, but what drives you to bring that mental health advocacy for awareness into it? What keeps you going with that?
So I got divorced at the end of 2022. So, and that led to me sort of leaving the family home. So 2023, that year was a real struggle for me mentally. I felt suicidal, and ironically, I had a real strong support of family and friends. I couldn't ask for any more. Um, However, I still felt alone, um, and it's it's going through that experience and coming out the other side and thinking, do you know what? If I can help one person get through what I went through,
Mm.
and then I looked at actually the profession that I'm working in. I'm talking to men on a daily basis. Not everyone shows the same signs and symptoms of mental health or suicidal thoughts, but because I've been through that, there may be things that I can see that others won't. Um, so I thought, you know what, I've got this. I'm in a profession and a trade where I'm talking to people daily. There's got to be more than just cutting hair to this.
Mm.
It's a personal thing. Um, it's very one to one, and that's why I say it is a little bit like therapy because you have conversations with people that they may not talk to their friends about.
Mm.
So I thought I need to use my experiences of what I've gone through and try and recognize that in others. And if I can help, then it's a win-win for me.
Yeah, and I suppose it goes back to the start when we were saying about finding out that other people can relate to you and have been through the same
Yeah.
experiences. So if anyone is struggling, they come to you.
Yeah.
Whilst there's no two scenarios that are ever going to be the same, you can understand maybe slightly better than someone who hasn't sort of been through that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it brings another element. And in terms of the therapy thing, I mean, I've heard females talk about this a lot. They say like, "Oh, my hairdresser is my therapist,"
Yeah.
and whilst it's probably a slight joke, it's probably also quite true. Like
Yeah.
talking about stuff that's going on in your life. Um, Maybe men's haircuts are quicker than female haircuts, so
Yeah.
maybe you don't get as long to speak. But I think there's definitely an element of how we get men speaking as well
Yeah.
coming, and that's just something that's getting more and more spoken about,
Yeah.
which is a good thing at the moment.
Yeah.
In terms of when you have a client in the chair, say, I know you said about when you start the conversation, you can sort of gauge straight away if they're going to talk.
Yeah.
Are there any signs or symptoms that you spot that maybe shows they're not doing okay, even if they are talking to you about football or something else?
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously it's harder with people I've never met before. But yeah, some people can sort of look. I say look down, or you can see that there's stuff going on in their heads, and that's why I tend to always start the conversation with "How are you keeping?" And there might be things they might say, but it's difficult because ultimately they're coming to get their hair cut. They're not coming for a counselling session. So I can try, even if I see something that I might think they're struggling. There's only so much I can do to see if they're willing to open up,
Mm,
and if they're not, then I have to respect that, because it ultimately, like I say, they are coming for a haircut. They might not want to talk about stuff, and if it comes across that I'm pushing for information that seeing why they're not okay, it could lead to a whole different conversation, or they could turn aggressive, or
mm,
so it's that mutual respect. I have to sometimes stand back and think, okay, I get the feeling maybe you're not okay, but maybe right now is not the time you want to talk about it. So I have to respect that. But yeah, I mean, people that I've had sort of young guys open up. I had someone tell me their nana just passed. So then that conversation was how it's making him feel, relationship he had. So it's funny. It's either one of two ways. So they either really open up, or
mm.
they're quite closed. And it's a case of, okay, I have to respect both in that instance.
Yeah, I suppose that's comes back to that sort of mutual respect that we spoke about earlier as well, when you were pointing out that it's led by them. So
Yeah.
again, it's all about that, isn't it, in the chair? Um, Outside of sort of barbering and stuff, from what you've learned from your own experiences, from doing that, and from sort of studying outside as well and learning more about mental health,
Yeah.
are there any other signs that people might be able to spot in the people around them, whether it's friends, family, changes of behavior? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Yeah. I mean, from my experiences, I know when I've struggled in the past, like gambling was something I turned to, um, and my family noticed that I was gambling more. Um, so I'd say things like, drinking more, or like gambling more, being snappy, frustrated, um, shutting people off, aggression that's not normally, that their personal trait.
Mm.
Um, because I mean, typically with men just don't talk.
Yeah.
Um, and I think there's a reason that I think four in five suicides are committed by men. Um, and I think it's the biggest, men under 35, the biggest death cause is suicide.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of guys will either shut off, um, turn to sort of substance abuse, or gambling. Yeah, it's difficult because obviously especially with friends and family, if you know them well and things don't seem quite right,
Mm.
normally it's because that is the case. And as much as I'd like to say talking about it can help, um, it takes for them to want to talk first. Um, which is why I think with barbering and mental health, if you catch someone who is struggling in time, it can stop that sort of spiral into abuses in in alcohol, drugs,
Yeah.
um, because ultimately once you're going down that hill, that's when separations can occur, losing your job. So that was my aim with barbering, was tackling. And that's why I say I want to tackle mental health, because I want to try and catch it before it leads to much bigger problems.
Mm.
And like I say, as barbers, we have the privilege of talking to people and maybe seeing them signs before they get out of control.
Yeah. So I suppose they're going into those sort of self-destructive
Yeah.
behaviors like drinking, gambling, even going to the gym too much is one that I've heard of recently,
Okay.
like
Yeah.
just overtraining yourself to the
Yeah.
point of like burnout.
I
But
think it's anything that takes your mind off the issue.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think in doing that, people maybe don't realize that that's because of something else.
Yeah.
They just think it's solo in itself.
Yeah.
And maybe they try and help them get out of drinking, but they don't actually look at the cause
Yeah.
and what was going on before that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just bringing that awareness, I suppose, is what we're trying to do around that. Um, and also in there, you said about people wanting to talk
Yeah.
and wanting to help themselves, which just took my mind back to when I started with the Samaritans. And with the Samaritans, when you listen, that is exactly what you're doing. You're listening,
Yeah.
and there's no advice. So very often in day-to-day life, when people are struggling, or if people come to people with a problem, as a helpful friend or family member or whoever it is,
Yeah.
we tend to try and come up with a solution for them and try and help them get through it and fix it, all with good intentions.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's taking a moment to realize, actually, by listening, you can let them get their thoughts out on paper and start to help them find out the answers.
Yeah.
So it's that power in them making the moves.
Yeah.
It's all well us saying, okay, you're struggling with this, let's take you here and you can have a therapy appointment.
Yeah.
You've got to almost listen until they come up with that answer themselves. There's a lot of power in that,
Yeah.
which was a massive thing that I learned starting that.
Yeah.
And just, listening, the power of listening.
And I think that can be said for a barbershop as well, because like I say, I've cut people's hair that I don't know. So all I am doing is listening. I don't know these people personally. So when they are explaining their stories and their issues, then I can sort of maybe give some advice on what I've done. I'm not saying, you should do this or do that, because it's not in my right to do that, and I don't know them as a person. So if I explain what I've done and what's helped me, that could give them a bit of a pathway. Actually, yeah, that's something I could try, instead of, like you say, telling them, well, why don't you try this and why don't you try that? Because ultimately they're just going to feel pushed into a corner, because maybe that's just not something they're comfortable doing, which then leads to frustration. And it's just not a healthy approach.
And it also, which a lot of people maybe don't realize, is it leads to people feeling like you're not listening.
Yeah.
You could be listening for ages, and then you suggest something, and in that moment they think, oh, they're not listening.
Yeah.
They just want you to listen. And sometimes people do want advice.
Yeah.
I must say, like, there is people that do want advice and do want help. But a lot of the time, just helping them get it out and find their own course is really powerful.
Yeah. And I think that's important, that if you push someone to trying to do something with all good intentions, ultimately you could cut that tie with them, and they may not want to turn to you anymore, because in their mind you just don't understand. So what's the point in me talking to you again? Because from when I last spoke to you, you just made me feel frustrated and didn't help at all. So it's it's quite a it's a delicate matter. So I think, like you say, it needs to be led by them
Mm.
with all, like you said, with all good intentions, but ultimately it needs to come from them, um, because the help is out there with all sorts of issues, mental health, drink, but until it comes from within, from that person, it's 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 difficult. It's
Yeah.
really difficult.
Yeah. And taking it out of mental health, to use another sort of analogy, I suppose you could take it into physical health, where you might have someone who's obese
Hmm.
who, in order to get healthy and stay healthy, they have to really want that
Yeah,
within. They have to want that. If they just want to lose 20 kilos or something, they can do that quite easily, get to the end point, think, wow, I've reached my goal.
yeah,
And then how many people have we seen put that weight back on
yeah,
after?
yeah,
And I think in a way it's similar in terms of wanting that internally
yeah,
and having the desire to get healthy, but also stay healthy.
yeah,
And I think that's the same. I think if your goal is to just get them to an appointment and think that's the end of it, for mental health, say,
yeah,
that's not it. They've got to want to go to that appointment, but then get better and stay better
yeah.
on the other side of it.
Yeah, yeah, personal drive is such a big thing, and I think for a lot of people, I know with my experience when I was down, I think when I felt suicidal, um, and I used to read that sort of men my age, they'd have kids, they'd have good family support, and they commit suicide, and I think I'd think how could you do that? You've got a family, you've got this, but that period in my life with my two kids, it, it's hard to say, but it was all irrelevant because of my struggles inside were so deep. None of that really mattered, and I think it was that point I hit rock bottom, and then that's when I sort of felt, okay, and now I need to do this for myself and for my family. But the lead up to that was people saying, do this, do that, but like you say, it just falls on deaf ears because at that time it wasn't coming from within me. And I think once you hit that rock bottom and you sort of want to look for the help, it's all about motivation as well. Once you have that motivation and that drive, um, it's a lot easier to get help and want help.
And again, with that, a lot of the time, people who have families or children or whatever it is around them, a lot of the time people will use that to try and help the situation. So
Yeah,
if someone comes to me and says they're struggling, and I say, well, what about your daughter? That just, again, it shows you're not listening.
no,
It's they're so past that, and they know that the daughter's there. They know they love the daughter, but it's something so deep within that they just can't
yeah,
see. So yeah, again, it's just that listening and not jumping in with you're almost trying to guilt trip them, I suppose,
yeah,
in
and
that
that's
scenario.
how it comes across, and it's not that way at all. Like you mentioned, the good intentions. It's not that people are trying to guilt trip you, but you have, for me, I know I had kids, so if I was to do anything, it's devastating for them. But at that period in my life, none of that mattered because
Mm,
what was going on in my head was just so draining and so heavy. It's sort of, well, I don't know where to turn.
yeah.
I don't know how to escape this. And I think once you hit rock bottom, or once you hit a personal rock bottom, then you can get the motivation to look at helping yourself. And that's when you can turn to people and say, look, I really want to do this. Do you have any advice, or can you help me in any way?
Yeah.
But I think until that point, it's difficult. And like you say, it's all about listening, which is with the barbering side of it, cutting clients' hair. It's the perfect time to listen.
Yeah, 100%. Um, and back into the barbering side of things then. So you haven't started it yet, but you're looking at starting to cut hair for homeless people.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about that and what's motivated you to take that sort of step into that.
So I look. So there's a charity that's been going for about 10 years now called Haircuts for Homeless, and I saw them on Instagram, and I thought that's a really good concept. Because then I looked into sort of homelessness, and unfortunately homelessness and mental health go hand in hand. And I sort of thought to myself, well, actually, this is something that another avenue I could take, and try and help people that are probably in the worst parts of their life. Um, just a haircut and a chat. You know, we all know with a haircut or a beard trim, you feel better about yourself. If I can put in a chat with just talking, and it can be about anything. It can be talking about what they've done in their life, football, their interests. Um, it's it's something that I really wanted to look into more. Um, so I contacted a few homeless shelters and charities and said, look, I've got an idea of volunteering to come in and cut visitors' hair. And I'm looking at using barbering as a way of tackling mental health. And I feel, I could be of good use to your centre. And like each one that I'd spoken to sort of just bit my arm off and said, yeah, we would love that. We used to have a barber doesn't come in now, or they've not had one before. And, they said, oh, we think this would be, excellent for the clients that we have coming in. So from that, it sort of led on to me visiting. So there was Passage Charity, which they run with the City of Westminster Council. So they've got different centres and sites there. Just Life, they've got a community hub in Brighton. So they have clients going there just for like a social interaction thing. And then Crawley Open House, they've got a shelter and a centre to help people get back on their feet. So they're the three charities that I'm working with. And yeah, from next month it'll be a case of only sort of 2-3 hours a week going into the centres, cutting clients' hair, having a chat, and yeah, if I can help someone just open up or just be someone to turn to, then again, it's hopefully it'll be good for them and their mental health.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I think as a homeless person, you must not really have many interactions with humans day to
No,
day, because if you are on the street and people are walking past, very few people even look your way or say
yeah,
anything. So sometimes just wanting to have that human connection
yeah,
and getting a haircut at the same time makes them feel better in sort of how they look and how they feel.
yeah,
I think it goes perfectly hand in hand with everything you're doing,
yeah.
and I think it's a great idea.
The one down in Brighton, when I went and visited there, I spoke to one of their clients, and he said, "This is the only place I come to because I'm too scared to leave my home." So that charity is more of an outreach to people that to get them out and about. And he said, I'd struggle to go into a barber shop. So he said, if something was to be here, he said, that would be absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
And it's stuff like that. So it's just building up their confidence that a bit more human interaction, and it might help them to do more in their life. So it's certainly something that I'm hoping will get a lot of people to open up more.
Yeah. Yeah. And in terms of your time sort of doing this, obviously it's still quite new that you've really sort of kicked things off, but have you come across any challenges or any rewards since doing this? What sort of come to mind when you think about your challenges and rewards from what you're doing?
Yeah, so I suppose challenge. I'm more so with the homeless project that I'm doing. So I suppose challenges will be, having to do sort of risk assessments, because a lot of these centres aren't sort of salon environments. So it's a matter of keeping myself safe, keeping them safe, and sort of appreciating that I'm going to come into contact with people that have serious mental health conditions. So it's going to be a way of myself adapting to each client. I've said to the centres, we're going to use almost like a booking system. So the week before I'm due to come in, I'll know how many clients I'm going to see. And I've sort of said it'd be good to know, a little history of their mental health and things that I need to be aware of
Yeah.
when cutting their hair, because I don't want to say anything or do anything that might upset them or cause them to be agitated. So the risk assessment side of each haircut will be something that I'm really strong on, for myself and for them. Um, but in regards to sort of the rewards of all this, it's just a case of, this is something I started back in November, and it was only going to be something little that I wanted to do. Um, but actually, as time's gone on and the more people I talk to, there is such a need for mental health in men anyway, but using barbering as a way to do that. It's just talking to people, knowing how many people struggle, like the homeless projects, each charity, being really keen to get it started. It's just a case of, well, actually there's something here that could just completely expand to so many different avenues. And it's really nice to know that I can be a part of that. And
Yeah.
I've had barbers contact me and said, look, if you need help with some of the centres you're working in, let me know. Because obviously, as this grows, that's going to be a case anyway. I'm going to need help, because it's just going to be impossible to be in all places. So barbers are reaching out to me and saying that they'll be willing to help, and it's nice to know that I've started a project that can eventually help a lot of people.
Mm.
Yeah, like I say, not everyone's going to want to talk, and if that's the case, then they get a haircut and they feel good about themselves. That alone doesn't have to be a conversation, but just a haircut for someone, make them feel a little bit better, can just give them a bit of a kickstart into doing something that they don't normally do.
Yeah, definitely. And in terms of like how long ago you started it, like you say, since November, you've sort of been reaching out and speaking to people. The positivity around it and the amount of people that have come forward and got involved, it
Yeah,
just explains it. It shows the need for something like this, and I think mental health in men is something that's getting there.
yeah,
And I think the government have sort of announced a 10-year plan this year to start addressing it a bit more. But yeah, it just shows the need for it massively, that
yeah,
this amount of people have come forward and it's taken off this quickly.
yeah,
So yeah, I think it's a really good little like niche area, but the perfect place to have
yeah.
these conversations, like you said.
And the thing is, I sort of I appreciated that not everyone's going to want to talk. So I created, for barbershops, I created a poster, with just some helplines. So, for example, Samaritans, Gamble Aware, food banks, because obviously with cost of living, and the charity Mind. And I sort of spoke to a barbershops up and down the country and said, look, I've created a poster just to put in your shop for when people are sitting, because for those who don't want to talk but maybe do need help, if they see something, with a phone number, or even just see something and think, actually, I am struggling with that at the moment.
Yeah.
So I created that, and been fortunate enough that a lot of barbershops up and down the country, wanted to participate in it. So them posters are up in shops, which is on my Instagram page. You can, a few people have sent me pictures up in their windows, and so it's trying to cover all different angles for every person, for
Yeah.
those who want to talk, for those who don't want to talk, for those who maybe don't know they have a problem, but subconsciously they do.
Mm.
It's just trying to get people to talk, and just being aware of stuff that's going on in their life that maybe they need to look at a little bit further, without being too overbearing and trying to push stuff onto them. It's just trying to find that healthy balance.
Yeah. And how do you think you can, or not you personally, it's a big ask, but how do you think barbers in general and barber shops can play their part in sort of breaking down this stigma around mental health?
Yeah,
for men?
it's difficult because not everyone, not all barbers or people that want to get into barbering are going to want to be able to sort of be therapists, if you like. um, which is why I'd like to get my posters in the majority of barbershops.
Mm.
Because barbers themselves, they might have a conversation with someone and it might be something they've never dealt with. So the barber themselves might not know what advice to give or where to turn. So I wanted to have like a project for barbershops that if they do come across someone who asks for help and they don't necessarily know what to do, then they've got some information, contact numbers, or, you know, anything of relevance to the subject. And yeah, barbers themselves, if they're struggling, that they've got somewhere to turn to. So I've got a Facebook group which is solely just barbers. Um, so for any issues they have, they can put a question in the group, and then other barbers can answer
Mm.
and give their feedback and advice on what they've done. So yeah, it's trying to not push on barbers to like say, look, you should be asking your clients how they're doing, because not everyone's going to feel comfortable doing that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if a client comes to you and says, look, I've got this issue, have you got any advice, then there's a platform that they can turn to and use. That's what I sort of want to achieve.
I think having the posters out there is a big step. If they were everywhere and every barbershop had them in there,
Yeah,
then at least there's something whilst you're sitting there waiting and
yeah,
you see that catches your eye. If you don't want to talk, perfect. If you do talk and there's something that the barber maybe can't help you with, they can at least point to that
yeah,
poster and say, okay, maybe give this charity a call
yeah.
and they can help you with that. From your own experiences of doing this and time barbering, sort of having these conversations, are there any memorable experiences that you sort of come to mind from your short time doing this?
Yeah, I'd say I've probably mentioned it, but I'd say one conversation I had with a new client, and again, just asked how they were, and it was only a half an hour haircut, and throughout that haircut, um, yeah, I'd learnt that they just split from his wife of 20 years. He'd left the family home. The kids were really torn. He was really struggling because he had to move back to his parents. I mean, the guy must have been sort of in his 50s.
Mm.
Um, and luckily, I'd sort of gone through similar experiences, so I could relate to an extent. And at the end of the haircut, he said, "Look, I really appreciate you spending time talking to me about your experiences and sort of letting me vent about what's going on."
Mm.
Um, and then once he'd left, I sort of sat down and like I said before, I thought, I cannot believe what he's just told me. Um, I now know this man, but half an hour ago I didn't, and I'm sure he didn't have the intention of coming in to have his hair cut and talk about his life falling apart.
Mm.
And I thought, you know, all I did was ask him how he was, and from that, he sort of felt sort of felt relieved that he'd spoken to someone, an outside person about what's going on. Completely objective from my point of view. I don't know him, and it just I felt really sort of honoured that he felt he could do that.
Mm.
And I suppose that, like I've said, that was the seed that made me think, actually, this is, mate, how many people are out there that just want to talk. So I was sort of taken back and quite honoured that he felt he could open up like that.
That's powerful when someone does that. That feeling of, being able to be the person that can listen to that and help someone on that day where they need to just vent, like you say.
Yeah,
Um, and again, it's a testament to yourself, your ability to relate and guide them through that conversation,
yeah,
essentially.
yeah. And I suppose for me, it's never really dawned because, you know, for me it's just doing my job and doing my job in regards to the haircut. But I suppose, yeah, me as a person, just asking how they are. I know not everyone does that, but it's sort of like I wish they did, because how many people else would open up
Yeah.
when they need it, which is sort of the goal for me, really.
Yeah.
It's just having that open talk and just to get the ball rolling, or however that looks in regards to helping people.
Mm. How do you see the future of it for yourself, for what you're trying to create? Do you have any projects in mind that you'd like to sort of get started with? I know you've got the homeless haircutting stuff starting, but
Yeah, so another avenue I'm looking down is talking to colleges and academies. So people coming into barbering, um, not to put them off, because that's not the plan at all, but just to make them aware of potential pressures in the industry. Um, and that's not just sort of a confidence thing, but coming into industry, and like I said, the majority of barbers are self-employed. So making people aware of, the stresses that can cause financially, um, the self-criticism of trying to create the perfect haircut. Um, so again, I suppose a little bit like mental health, trying to catch barbers at an early stage on just preparing them for the industry, and how a mental toll it can be trying to balance everything.
mm,
Um, so a couple of colleges I've spoken to, they're interested, but they'd like for me personally to have some form of qualification in mental health. So I'm currently enrolled in it's a government funded uh, level 2 course in mental health awareness. So I'm looking to do this and a suicide prevention course, just so I've got a little bit of background that I can take to these organisations and say, look,
mm,
this is my experience, this is what I want to do. Um, and they've said once you have sort of qualifications and certificates, we'd be happy for you to come in and chat to our students and stuff like that. So that's definitely another avenue I want to take, as well as getting posters and what have you into barbershops.
yeah,
Um, Obviously, there's a lot more homeless shelters out there, but in doing so, I'm gonna need to recruit barbers.
yeah,
Um, so it's nice that some have already come forward and said, look, I really want to help. So yeah, it's one of those things that, like I said, it started off small, and it was just for barbers and their mental health. But as it's gone on, there's actually a need in so many different areas, and it's just getting the word out that barbering is an excellent way to tackle mental health, whether that's just a conversation, whether that's advising someone to another organization. It's just such a good stepping stone into helping people.
definitely. And I think going into like the schools and colleges when they're getting into barbering just at the start and having those conversations with them, another really good idea in terms of explaining to them the pressures of it. People, kids at that age don't know about taxes or anything,
No,
so explaining about the self-employed stuff and
yeah,
how that works and then the pressures that can bring.
yeah,
Also, I suppose, explain to them that you could unknowingly become a form of a therapist.
yeah,
Obviously,
yeah,
people might open up, and you might, even if you're not looking for them to, might just happen
yeah,
anyway. It might just naturally flow that way, the conversation.
yeah.
So, yeah, making people aware that there's a lot more to it than just what meets the eye at
And
the
that's the
start.
thing. It's the awareness. It's not. Look, this is a requirement in barbering, but more so to be aware that you're talking to people every day. There's a chance someone could turn to you and say, "Look, I need help,"
Mm,
and to maybe a young student, they're not going to really know what to do in that situation. So, and also with barbershops, unless you do an apprentice with a shop, once you leave a college or an academy and you're technically qualified, barbershops will take you, but then expect you to hit the ground running. So instantly you feel that pressure of, right, now I need to perform, but your confidence might not be there.
mm,
Um, so it's just making sort of barbers coming through, just be prepared that, these topic of conversations might be happening. Um, like I said, the self-employed stuff, and you might enter shops that expect a lot from you, especially busy shops. So it's just giving them the tools to go into the industry as prepared as they can be.
Mm.
I think that's sort of the next step that I want to take, as well as keeping everything else going as well.
Yeah, I think it's all good. I think all of the ideas that you've come up with so far and everything you're doing is really, really good, and hopefully will bring a lot of benefit to a lot of people.
Yeah, and I mean, I've had conversations with barbers in the US as well, and they've sort of said the poster idea is really good. It'd be good if they could have something similar, which I said I'm happy to do. Obviously, it's difficult chatting overseas, but I've had a few US barbers reach out and say, look, it's something they'd like to get involved in. So, as much as everything I'm doing at the moment is like UK based, potentially it could go overseas, because
Yeah.
obviously barbering is an international skill.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's just a case of seeing where it can go and adapting to each person and country really as well.
Yeah. No, excited to see. So coming in to finish then, so something I like to do at the end of an episode
Yeah.
is I ask the guest to leave a question for the listener.
Okay.
So like I said to you before this episode, I used to like taking the episodes away and speaking to friends outside of it
Yeah.
about what I'd listened to. So the idea is you leave them with a question, they can go and speak to a friend, family member, stranger, whoever it is.
Yeah.
What question would you give to the listener?
I suppose a big one would be, as a male or as someone who obviously knows a male, have they ever been to a barber shop and wanted to open up about an issue they have?
Nice.
So I'd be interested to know how many times someone's wanted to talk
Yeah.
with their barber, because a lot of people, I mean, you hear, barbers get invited to people's weddings, and so a lot of people are really good friends with their barbers, but maybe haven't crossed that line of, actually, I see you once a month and I talk to you a lot, but I've not sort of felt the need to open up with stuff I've got going on. So I'd be interested to know how many people have wanted to open up to their barber, but perhaps haven't because they've just seen or deemed it sort of not suitable.
Yeah, that would be interesting to find out. So for anyone listening who wants to find out a bit more about what you're doing, where can they find you online? Where can they follow you?
So I'm mainly on Instagram. So my page is Beyond the Clippers. So on there, I'm sort of posting stuff that I'm doing with the organisation, events I've got coming up. Facebook, I've got the group Beyond the Clippers, which predominantly is for barbers, but it is for people to reach out if need be. I've got, and also on my Instagram page, I've got an email that I can be contacted on and a phone number, which I keep sort of separate from my personal one. So if anyone wants to reach out with any issues, they can do that. And then, yeah, I've got sort of business cards that I'm looking to prop up in coffee shops and what have you. And like I say, hopefully you go into a barbershop one day and see one of my posters. And
Yeah.
so yeah, Instagram's probably my main one at the moment that I'm sort of promoting what I'm doing. But I always say to people, always feel free to send me a direct message or a DM if there's anything that's troubling them. I'd be happy to help out.
Sweet. Yeah, I'll link it all below anyway. So
Oh,
for
cool.
people listening, they
Yeah.
can just scroll down and click on it, hopefully. Thank you so much for coming on.
No,
I really
thanks for
enjoyed
having
it.
me.
And
Yeah,
I've
no, thank
enjoyed
you.
learning all about what you're doing and what you've got planned. And yeah, I'm excited to see how far it goes and how many people you can help through it. So
Yeah, that'd be
best of
interesting
luck.
to speak to you in a year's time and see
Absolutely.
how it's going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you have enjoyed this episode, please do share it with someone who would find value from it. So a friend, family member. If you have not already, then if you can rate and follow the show on whatever platform you're listening, that helps us reach new people. And you can also follow on Instagram at Lonely Chapter Podcast. And lastly from me, thank you for listening.